Hello, everyone. My name is Melissa. Welcome into Senior Living Live. I hope you all are having a fantastic day today. Well, we have a very special and unique webinar on tap for you today called Living with Dementia. We have a few special guests joining us, including 3 individuals who have been diagnosed with different types of dementia, and they are eager to share their day-to-day experiences with all of you and answer all of your questions in this webinar. Now, we do have a little bit of a different format today. Jackie Pinkowitz, the board chair for Dementia Action Alliance, will share with us exactly what DAA does and the tools that they provide those diagnosed with dementia on their website. She will also act as a moderator during our question and answer session with our 3 special guests today. So just a reminder, all audio and video lines will be muted. So if you have any questions that you want to ask our panel, just scroll down to the bottom of your screen where it says Q&A. Type your question out there for the entire panel or for a specific guest, and Jackie will help moderate those questions with our panel today. So without further ado, Jackie Pinkowitz, it is always great to see you. We look forward to speaking with you and your friends today. The webinar is all yours.
Oh, thank you so much, Melissa. It is wonderful to be here with all of you today. I should mention that the Dementia Action Alliance is a nonprofit organization, and we really do focus on helping people live fully and well with dementia. We have been collaborating with the Arbor Company for a good number of years now because we have the same values and beliefs, and we are delighted to be able to be here with you today. And before I introduce you to our wonderful panel, I just want to share with you
You should.
I just want to give you an overview of the Dementia Action Alliance. It really is a diverse coalition of people and organizations and companies and communities, but we're all focused on creating a more positive society for people living with dementia and their families. And the motto that you see on the screen, "Nothing about us without us," is really a very famous motto from the disability community. And the reason we've taken it on as well is because we understand that nobody can do a better job of helping everyone understand how good it is to be inclusive in your communities, to welcome people and their families living with dementia, because they have so very, very much to offer. We always talk about together we can make this country a more inclusive country. Everyone is accountable for ensuring that people can live well with dementia wherever they live. I love Maya Angelou's philosophy. She always said, "Do the best you can until you know better. Then, when you know better, do better." And I think that's what we try to do every single day at DAA. And I'm going to have the privilege of introducing some special friends to you all. These 3 individuals absolutely exemplify people who are living well and living fully with dementia. Doreen Monks is a nurse and advanced nurse practitioner. Mike Belville is a telecommunications whiz. And Pauline Gordon directed operations for a large investment firm. I want to start with Doreen, and then Mike, and then Pauline. And what I'm asking them to do is just tell the audience a little bit about yourselves and how your journey has gone since diagnosis. Doreen, would you be willing to start?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You.
Hello, everyone, and thanks so much for joining. Jackie said it's an interesting time when you're first diagnosed. I was 62 at the time I was diagnosed, so 6 years going, with probably the onset being a little bit before that. And I was a neuroscience nurse practitioner. I was running a stroke program at a local medical center, and whammo, one day that stopped. And I was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's disease. And even with my understanding of the clinical process from my prior vantage point, it didn't make the journey any easier. And you know, it's a bumpy road to getting diagnosed and going through all the loops and jumping all the high ropes to get to where you want to be. But I looked at it this way: you know, every day you travel to a wonderful place, and it's the best place you ever want, and you always want to go there, and you always go the same way to the point where it's rote. You just go and you don't even think about driving, and then suddenly somebody takes the map and shakes it, and now that place is still there, but getting there is a much more cumbersome effort. The roads have changed, there's twists and turns and bumps and blockages, and you have to make the decision. Either I don't go and I stay here and basically wait for the disease to overcome me, or I take I take the chance and I take the road and I learn the new route and I go over the bumps and around the blockages and I get to the place where I want to be. And that really has been my philosophy of living. I had to find a new purpose in life. You know, I was a stroke nurse practitioner, so that was my field. And then suddenly Alzheimer's came upon me, and that became my new source of work and effort, because I feel very strongly that about two things. One, you have the absolute right to have a full and happy life, and you can have a full and happy life with a dementia diagnosis. It's absolutely out there and available to you. And secondly, it's time to take Alzheimer's disease and other dementias out of the corner and make it forefront, so that now, instead of everyone with dementia having to adapt to society, the society will now have to adapt to you. And so that we become, again, I'm just as much a part of my community as anyone else, and I deserve the respect and to be able to participate in my community despite my diagnosis and despite whatever changes occur to me because of it. And I think that really is what the key to finding a happy life. You know, I get up every morning and I expect it to be a good one. Some days it's good, sometimes it's bad, but you know what? The day ends and a new day starts. And that's really how I found. You just take, you know, once you get all the legal stuff and all the planning out of the way, you just take each day and make it the very best you can. And you know what? Alzheimer's is along for the ride, but it certainly is not my life. And I think that really has been my basic philosophy.
I think that's fabulous, Doreen. You're one of the fabulous examples of having positivity and resilience to help you keep moving forward. And I really appreciate it. Mike, can we hear from you a little bit about yourself before diagnosis, and then how the journey has kind of gone along since diagnosis?
Sure, absolutely. And again, thank you for inviting us all to be here. It's an honor to be here with Arbor. As my nameplate indicates, my name is Mike Belville. I live in Rhode Island, a little tiny state up in New England. My wife and I just celebrated our 40th anniversary in April. We have 3 children and 6 grandchildren. My symptoms actually started in my late 40s, and I was actually diagnosed with younger onset Alzheimer's at the age of 52 and a half, going towards my 53rd birthday. I was able to continue working as best I could, and through a series of events of leaving work, having to go back and forth. He ended up retiring at the age of 54. I worked for a large telecommunications company. I mentioned that it was younger onset Alzheimer's, but it was about 2 or 3 years later, they actually changed the diagnosis to Lewy body dementia with Parkinsonism. And like Doreen spoke, you know, I think everybody has choices in life. And what I learned early on was, as great as the doctors are, no one can tell you how long the progression of this disease is going to last. So, you know, I kind of quickly learned, what are you going to do with your life from point A to point B? And I always reference point B as to when I have to transition to some type of long-term care setting. And like the quote that Jackie put up, I like quotes myself. And one of my favorites is from a movie, Shawshank Redemption. And there's a line in that movie that Morgan Freeman repeats: get busy living or get busy dying. And I chose to get busy living. I feel like I still have a career. My career now is as a dementia advocate. And I do that in a number of ways, doing, you know, speaking engagements such as this, to being on different task forces across national ones, as well as committees, and advocating at the local, state level, as well as the federal level, to get increased funding for research. But, you know, like I said, the thing is that everybody has a choice as to what you want to do with your life. And I love what Doreen talked about staying in your community. We just moved back to Rhode Island recently, and I was blessed in the past to be able to volunteer at local senior centers doing what we call Tech Corner. And so I'm actually starting that in the community where I'm living now. It's going to start up next month, where I'll be volunteering at my senior center and helping the senior population with their technology issues. I can still help people one person at a time because I can no longer multitask, but it's still a way of meaningful engagement for me. And if I had to, you know, put a prescription out there for people, I think for folks who've been recently diagnosed, or even people who've been diagnosed for some time, it's my belief that social engagement is the #1 prescription you should be getting with a dementia diagnosis. Medication obviously is important, but it can't take the place of staying socially engaged in a meaningful way, something that gives you purpose, that gets you out of bed every morning, that makes you feel like you're still contributing to society in a meaningful way. And luckily, our paths crossed with BAA about 4 years ago, I believe now, 4 or 5 years ago. And I don't think anybody exemplifies a way of giving folks like us a voice better than DA does. So I think I'll just leave it at that for now, and give Pauline a chance to talk as well.
Thank you, Mike. Pauline, would you give us a little sense of how your journey has gone?
Sure. My name is Pauline Gordon, and I was actually diagnosed at the age of 57. And what happened was, basically, I was having a lot of trouble with repeating myself and asking questions over and over the same time. My husband was getting kind of frustrated with me, but he just kind of went along with it for a while. And my daughter actually was the one who one day, I guess she had seen enough of it, and she started writing down every time that one of these things occurred. I repeated myself or asked the same questions or walked into a room and said, why did I go in there? And she had a long list, a whole page full of these instances. And I wound up taking this to to my doctor. I was seeing a psychiatrist because I thought I was having trouble with depression. I thought that was what was causing my symptoms. And I was working for a large investment firm as director of operations, so I was supervising 500 representatives, and it was quite a, it was quite a lot of work. So I went ahead and she wrote down all of this, and I took it to my psychiatrist who was treating me for this so-called depression. And he said, "This isn't depression." And he sent me for testing and found out that I was actually suffering from dementia. And the form of dementia that I have is vascular dementia. So that was 9 years ago that occurred. And after that occurred, I thought, well, I can't just sit around. I mean, I had been a pretty active, busy person in my career, and I wasn't about to just sit around and lay back and die. So I started getting on the internet and I started looking for support. And I found a lot of support on the internet. I found other people who were living with dementia. And one of the things that one of the organizations I came to find was Dementia Action Alliance. And I became very active with Dementia Action Alliance. I'm currently on the board of directors and the advisory board for Dementia Action Alliance, and I really enjoy my work there. It gives me a lot of purpose, the purpose that I no longer had from my career. I have substituted with that work.
Mm.
So
Thank you, Pauline. The three of you are really inspiring. I know that we have a few questions for panel members, and Paul wrote, "What signs did you have before your diagnosis?" Anyone that wants to
well,
say
Actually,
anything about that?
I can say a little something about that.
Mhm.
I was, as I said, I was running a neurology program. And
Mhm.
my medical director, of course, is a neurologist who was actually also a very good friend. And one March morning, she knocked on my door and she said, "We have to talk." And she sat down, the door closed, and I said, "Uh-oh." But I never expected what she was going to say is that she said, "I think you're having some cognitive decline. I've noticed this and this and this over actually the last 2 years. And I think it's time for you to, get it tested." And that really was started. And it was interesting. I never recognized anything until she brought it up. And I said, "Oh, yeah, that makes sense. It does make sense." And that really was the start of it. So I was lucky to have a pro across the hallway to guide me, because otherwise I don't know what would have happened by the time it got more obvious to me. I'd probably be out of work.
And Shelley wanted to ask the panel, how do you have a family member tested for dementia? Would a primary care physician do the testing or a specialist?
well,
Mike?
for me,
Oh.
it was actually done by the psychiatrist is the one who initiated it, who was treating me for the
Mhm.
so-called depression. And he sent me to a neurology area, and they actually did all the testing. I don't really think that family physicians are very well versed in dementia, not as well as they might be.
Mhm. Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with that assessment. I would totally recommend someone go to a neurologist, and if possible, go to a neurologist who specializes in dementia or cognitive issues, because not even all neurologists are really up to date on dementia itself. It can be a very tricky diagnosis, and it's nothing that happens overnight, for sure. I mean, I think it took us a couple, 2 to 3 years before I finally got a diagnosis.
Mhm.
Because we thought, like Pauline, well, they thought it was depression. They thought it was work-related stress, and you just go through this whole long, drawn-out process. But to speak to the first question, the signs and symptoms for me at work were I was losing my multitasking skills. And the type of work I did was very critical to be able to do those things. On top of that, I was a trainer for new hires, and I found myself going and asking people I trained on how to do certain tasks. But that's what was showing up at work. But what was interesting is at home, it was showing up differently in a way. My personality was changing. I was becoming quicker to anger. I was losing interest in doing things that I used to do, my favorite hobbies and things like that. So it's for me, it was interesting to see the differences between work and home as to how this symptoms were showing up.
I think that Mike, I mean, they both hit the nail. You really have to be your own advocate and find the most qualified neurologist, because Mike is so right. Just don't pick a general neurologist, because many of them are clueless as well. I lucked out. My personal primary care physician was really on top of it, and she's the one that started the ball rolling. But most of the time, that's not how it works. And so if you find a neurologist who's a cognitive specialist, that's your best bet of getting a more accurate and certainly a shorter distance between onset and diagnosis, because they know exactly what to do and when to do it. And I think that's very beneficial. So they're both really right about that.
That certainly seems very worthwhile information for everyone to hear. Lori asked, what happened in your life to make you go to the doctor when you were diagnosed? Well, certainly Mike, you mentioned some things, and Pauline, you kind of mentioned that your daughter helped with the list, right? which was eye-opening, I'm sure. Anything else, guys?
Yeah, for me,
Mhm.
everybody has what's called an aha moment. And again, I had mentioned that we were already seeing a doctor because of things that were happening that we didn't understand. And for me, the aha moment, at the time, my wife and I were married 32 years. And as married couples do, you tend to have disagreements from time to time. And I call them challenging conversations. But what made this different was the following morning, I woke up getting the very cold shoulder from my wife, and I could not understand why, which really kind of made her even more angry. But once she realized, that I was sincere, and that I had no recollection of the conversation at all, and she started telling me about the conversation and some of the things I said, that really kind of shook me, because I said things I would never dream of saying to her. And that's what really brought us back to the doctor to say, listen, there's something more going on here. This is not stress. This is not depression. And there's something more going on. And after that conversation is what he started looking more, I guess, towards dementia. And, all the tests started coming back in that way. So it's, like I said, for a lot of folks, it's very common for people just to automatically think that it's all about memory loss. It's all about short-term memory, or it's all about, misplacing things. And it's way more than just memory loss. It's a whole host of different things. And like I said, in my case, it was affecting my personality, which was really affecting my marriage. And, my wife had told me after the fact that, she was getting concerned because I wasn't the same person she married. So I'm just, again, very luckily blessed that she decided to call, the doctor and not the lawyer. But you're on mute, Jackie.
Very wise woman.
Yes.
Lori and Stacy have similar questions. Lori said, what is involved in getting a dementia diagnosis? What kind of testing is there? And Stacy said, can you be specific as to the types of testing done? Doreen, can you help out?
Sure. Well, I started off with one MRI, ended up with probably about 4 or 5 of them in various types. And it took 2 so you usually get some kind of imaging done. The most accurate imaging is now a PET scan, which can actually identify the markers, actually the plaque and the tangles in your brain. Unfortunately, it costs $5,000 for that scan, and a lot of insurances will either not pay or pay a pittance. So as of now, you can get some. Now I had the MRIs, I had a PET scan, but without the markers, and that it still showed the Alzheimer's disease because the PET scan measures glucose activity in your brain, and in the areas that are dead, there's no activity. So I had the MRIs, the PET scan. I had, as I said, it took 2 neuropsych testing. One is a baseline, and then 6 months later had a second one. So all in all, it took over a year, Mike said, over a year to get the final diagnosis. So it's a combination of radiology, psych testing. The neuropsych testing is key. Because they're specialists in measuring how much change there is. They have norms that you're tested against. So that's really is key. So it's really radiology, neuropsych testing, and some others. I had an EEG done and just to make sure there was no seizure activity. So that really was and there's a lot of blood work involved because one of the key things that they have to do in the beginning is rule out anything that's fixable. Is there some kind of chemical imbalance? Is there some medication that's doing this? So they try to rule out all the things that are reversible, and then you get to the final diagnosis of whatever form of dementia you've been diagnosed with.
Pauline, did you go through different kinds of tests before you were diagnosed?
I really just went through the as soon as my psychiatrist saw the results, he sent me to a neurologist and they did the neuropsych testing right away. And the neuropsych testing is really very grueling. I've been through it 3 times now because every time I move, I have to go through the neuropsych testing again. So I just moved to Ohio and I have another long bout coming up in July. But it's the 4-hour test that I'm going to be facing in July. So it's a very grueling test and it's very hard and kind of depressing as you go through it because you have trouble answering the questions, and that's not very comforting.
Yeah, you're right. It's 4 hours of, and every time you take the test, it always feels like I've had 4 now. And you're right, there's 4 hours are it's like you're exhausted by the time you get done. You come out thinking, I know nothing. I'm getting dumber by the minute. Because you're not expected to finish any of it, but it feels like every time you take it, you're finishing less and less and less. And then I don't know about you, Pauline, but afterwards you had a follow-up visit. Did you have a follow-up visit with the neuropsychologist? And that's when they tell you the results verbally. And they show you stuff and you think, God, how was I off? I can't remember a picture. So if I look at a picture and say, oh, that's a really pretty flower, and you take it away, I have difficulty remembering it. So one of the parts of it is you have to draw a picture, and then you have to draw the picture from memory right away, and then afterwards, and then between that and the memory, the word finding remembrance, it's 4 hours of, but at the end of the day, that is, Pauline's 100% right. That's really the prime area of diagnosis is the neuropsych testing. So you get to be friends with your neuropsychologist, except for poor Pauline, who keeps changing states.
because she moved, right?
Yes.
To a different state. Absolutely. Mike, was that a similar experience?
Yeah, very
Yeah.
similar. Started off with MRIs, PET scans, SPECT scans, had multiple spinal taps. But the neuropsych exam is the one I think that usually clinches it. I mean, all the tests keep coming back, or kept coming back is probable Alzheimer's, because there's no one real definitive test that can say with 100% certainty that it's even Alzheimer's or dementia. The amyloid PET scan that Doreen's talking about, again, is unfortunately insurance companies just will not pay for it. So unless you get into some type of clinical trial where they will do those types of tests, and in my case, I was fortunate to get into a trial last year, a drug trial, specifically for Lewy body dementia, where they did what's called a DAT scan, which looks at the hippocampus, I believe, and shows what that looks like. They can tell that there's abnormalities, and then they're pretty much doing their best guess as to what type of, they know it's a cognitive issue, neurodegenerative disease. But sadly, right now, right now, the only way to tell definitively is that autopsy. And I told them they can't do that yet.
No, they can't do that. Not to
Nobody,
any of you.
nobody volunteers for that.
Not to any
At
of
that point,
you.
I'm not going to wait. No.
Yeah.
Paul asked interesting questions, and I know Mike certainly can answer this one first. What changes have you made since your diagnosis? Diet changes? Anything else?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. It took a while, to be honest with you, because when you get a diagnosis like this, you start hearing all these things on on the news, or you read these things on the web, and of course, within the last few years, they've been talking a lot about how diet can affect a diagnosis, or even potentially prevent it from happening. And I'll be honest with you, when I first started hearing those things, I was getting angry, because I was like, it was almost myself thinking, what, like I did this to myself, But what I learned is that even, the old adage, what's good for your heart is good for your brain. So, my wife and I went on a keto diet a couple of years ago. We were very 100% keto for about a year and a half until COVID hit. That kind of threw a wrench in it, but we're still maintaining a healthy diet. And for me, the side benefit was losing weight. I actually lost 80 pounds.
Wow.
But I've also gotten off all my high blood pressure medication. And we've actually seen the difference in my cognition. And, there's no way to, unless you baseline it, test it beforehand and go after the fact. But we can tell that just doing that and exercise, going, walking, going for our bike rides, have helped a lot. And, so it's, even after diagnosis doesn't mean, you shouldn't do those things. I would highly encourage anyone to.
Mike,
go in that
somebody wanted
direction.
to know why you chose the keto diet.
Great point. Well, I'm only laughing because, my wife and I always kind of bounced around a little bit, and, we've done the Whole30 diet, and that, was great short term, but it didn't last. And I hope people don't think too bad of me, but the biggest reason I chose keto was because you can still drink alcohol on your diet.
Oh, now this
You
is
still have a
one
glass of
honest
wine.
man. This is an honest man.
Well, I'm sorry, but I still love my bourbon. But, in moderation, of course. But that was really the one reason, why I really started looking into it. And once my wife Cheryl started doing research on it and reading more and more about it, and we're doing it under a doctor's watch. And we, he's he was concerned about it at first and, did all the blood work and, the concern was cholesterol and how it affects your kidneys and things like that. But everything is fine. I mean, all my blood work and everything has been perfectly normal.
That's terrific.
So, yeah, I mean, we
Any
are
other-
looking now.
Any other changes, Pauline or Doreen?
I think, Mike is right,
Mhm.
again, what you do for your heart, you do for your brain as well. So the blood vessels go up and down, north and south. And even though you're right, Mike, I remember thinking, oh my God, I remember doing that. That's probably why I got it, or I did this, or I ate that, or I ate this. And you have to get over that, because it's like, well, if it's true, it's too damn late to worry about it. So, but you can go forward. And again, the healthier your life, your health lifestyle, the happier your brain is going to be. And you're not taxing. Anytime you can help your brain to work more efficiently, you're right, Mike. It helps the cognitive aspect of the disease. So, I went kicking and screaming, and I'm still not perfect. But the exercise works, and and again, it's also good for your mental well-being. When you feel physically well, you feel mentally well, and when you feel mentally well, cognitively you feel better. So there's a whole good thing, a bunch of things to say about a healthy lifestyle. That really is the most important. You can only fix the things that you can fix, or help the things that you can help. So if you can't change the amyloid or the tau tangles or whatever the heck is going on in your head, you can still keep your body healthy, and you keep it well for the challenges ahead.
That's really good advice. Pauline, you didn't stop eating ice cream, guys, did you? Because I really can't ever do that.
I had a very poor diet when I was working because I was so busy working. I skipped lunch all the time, and I didn't always have time for breakfast, and I just ate a huge dinner. And that's not a good way to manage your weight either. So I also, when after I was diagnosed and different things, I lost quite a bit of weight. So that was a good thing. Now, I don't ride a bike because my balance is very bad. That's one of the things that's been affected for me, is my balance. But I do a lot of walking. We do a lot of walking. And I enjoy that kind of exercise.
Yeah, that's really healthy. I'm going to just switch the topic a little bit. Our associate, Mary Beth Kane, has to talk about, of course, her whole career is about the healthcare professionals. There are many healthcare professionals on this call today. What advice do you have for those who work with seniors? How can we help take the fear out of the diagnosis, or the fear about the diagnosis? How do we diminish that? That's not an easy answer, Mary Beth.
I guess I'll go. I'll start with this. I think sadly, the most common way a person gets a diagnosis, even by a good neurologist, was, at least my experience was, here's what all the test results show. We believe you have younger onset Alzheimer's. Here's a medication I'm going to start you on. I'll see you in 6 months. And he walked out the door, and that was it.
That was it.
A 5-10 minute out the door, gone, and that was all.
Mm-hmm.
So what could have been done differently was, number one, we could have been given resources to support groups, to more information, to what to expect next, you can still live a meaningful, purposeful life. What I tell folks who've been recently diagnosed, who I get a chance to talk to, or even folks who think they have symptoms but are afraid to go to the doctor because they're afraid to hear that word, is that your life doesn't end the day you get the diagnosis. or the day after. It, like I said, this disease is a progression, and no one knows how long that progression is going to take. I have sadly lost friends who were diagnosed and passed away within 4 years, 5 years. But I've also met other individuals and other care partners who cared for their loved ones for over 20 years. So you still can live a good, meaningful, purposeful life, even after diagnosis. And I
Would
think
it
it's
be
more
fair-
important to get the diagnosis.
Yeah,
I'm
Mike,
sorry,
would
go ahead.
it be fair for me to suggest that of all the people living with dementia in DAA, you all seem to have one or two traits very much in common. You are positive, you are determined to keep living your lives in meaningful ways, and you are resilient. Does that make sense? Because
I think
people want to know, what should you do? But for us, I feel like I've been watching people for years and years in DAA doing that, living positively and purposefully and doing what they enjoy, like with art, all of those different components. That has to be helpful. It just has to be.
well, I totally agree with you, but unfortunately, it didn't start out that way.
No.
I'll be perfectly honest with you. I mean, after the diagnosis, I tell people I was hiding under a rock for the first 5 or 6 months. All I did was go to work, come home, and I crashed because my brain was just completely wasted to begin with. But if it wasn't for Cheryl, kind of kicking me in the pants, saying enough is enough. And I jokingly tell people, she said it a little differently, but we'll just go with that. If it was her that said, we're not going to continue to live this way. And she started playing Dr. Google, found our local Alzheimer's Association chapter that got us into a consultation, that got us into a support group. And for me, the biggest thing that turned my life around was getting in that support group, was meeting other individuals, sitting around on a table, listening to other folks just share their experiences and realizing that these things were happening to me and I wasn't going crazy, because I really thought I was losing it. And you develop such a bond with these individuals. I'm closer with them than I am some of my own siblings to this day. So I kind of lost my train of thought as to what the question was, but I'll let the ladies talk now, so I'll be quiet.
I got my diagnosis on a phone call. I went for the PET scan, pulled in the drive to the parking lot at work, like 10 minutes after the test was done. And I got a phone call from the neurologist saying, well, it's Alzheimer's disease. I'll see you in the office. And the same thing happened to me, Mike. Well, I got the prescription for the Aricept and I'll see you in 6 months. If you have cancer, if you have a cardiac disease, there are health navigators to take you through the diagnosis process. And I don't understand why we can't have a dementia navigator. Somebody who, I don't expect every doctor, neurologist to have one in their office, but there should be a ready access to this person who's going to take you by the hand and say, I pulled a checklist list off the Alzheimer's Association, and that's how I got through the first year, doing the things they told me to do. But it should be easier than that, and just sit at home under a rock for a year, that's not a way to live your life. But if somebody was there to say, okay, this is what this next steps are going to be, and we're going to get you through that first 6 months, that first year, so then you can, again, it gives you a more positive outlook. There's hope. Without hope, there's nothing. And I think we all three of us, we are hopeful that each day is going to be the best day we can make it. Every day it can be a good day. But again, you have to get through that first few months of agony, trying to figure out what the heck do you do now. It could be made a lot easier for most individuals.
Do you agree, Pauline?
I agree. And I think that for me, what happened was after I was diagnosed, I decided to have fun. You know, I decided all of a sudden the stress from my job was gone, and I started getting into travel. I started traveling all over the place. I started going on cruises. I started traveling, and I started trying to enjoy myself. I thought, well, you know, if this is what's going to happen to me, I'm going to have some fun. So that's kind of the approach that I took with it, and just thought I'm going to make the most of the life I have.
And I think the biggest challenge, Jackie, is because there's such a tragedy narrative surrounding dementia in general. You know, what you see in the news, what you hear, you know, what you see in movies most of the time, you know, you see the person sitting in a wheelchair, kind of slumped over or this or that. And sadly, that's, you know, what's the biggest focus on when people hear the word Alzheimer's or dementia. And folks like Pauline and Doreen and what DAA are trying to do is to change that narrative, change that story to something that's positive.
Pauline, do you want to mention dementia discussions?
Yeah, Dementia Discussions is a weekly program that I help to produce, and we basically have a lot of people with dementia that come on, and we discuss various topics. You know, it might be, you know, education. It might be having fun. You know, it might be, you know, how to stimulate your mind. You know, and it's a really a wonderful program. I really think that being active as an advocate is incredibly helpful for people living with dementia. It gives you purpose again. You know, you lost your job and your career, but you regain your purpose, you know, when you work with an organization like DAA, and really challenge yourself. I think challenging yourself is very important when you have dementia, not just laying back and dying.
Absolutely. Mary Beth Kane was asking, at what age did you start seeing signs of dementia?
Well, I was 57 when it started occurring for me, and I probably had the diagnosis probably 5 years later.
And for me, it was, you know, we started noticing changes in my late 40s. But when you get the diagnosis, it's ironic how you can go back and look at things and go, oh, that's why that was happening. Or this is, so like Pauline, it, you know, it was probably 5 years before I even got the diagnosis that we really started to see things happening.
Lori asked, were you surprised by the diagnosis?
I wasn't surprised, I was relieved. I mean, at least I finally knew what was happening to me. I mean, I was surprised, I guess, a little bit because I'd always been, you know, highly productive and a smart person in school and that kind of thing academically. So it was kind of a blow in that regard, but I was relieved to understand what was happening to me.
Lori also asked, does dementia run in your family?
My
Elaine?
father had Alzheimer's.
Mike?
Ironically, at the time of my diagnosis, there was no family history at all. I was diagnosed, like I said, next month will make 8 years since my diagnosis. My mom's 83, and she was diagnosed 3 years ago with Alzheimer's. So I don't know that it, I mean, I personally, I think she has vascular dementia, not Alzheimer's, but so there is, I guess, a family history.
Doreen?
My mother actually had vascular dementia. You know, so I was her caregiver. She died from complications from COPD. My mother smoked from like the time of her birth until the time of her death practically. So that was actually obviously one of the things that affected her brain vascularly. And so she lived with it about 5 years before she passed away.
What is the best way families can help? Shirley's asking the panel. What's the best way families can help?
I don't know if one of the ladies want to go first, but I don't know, I feel like I'm doing too much talking. But I think what helps me the most is that they still treat me as the person I was before. You know, they don't, you know, there's a couple of rules that we follow, and I think that's general with anybody, is number one, you never argue with a person who has dementia, because you're never going to, you're just going to lose that argument. So don't even try. But the second thing is that, you know, things not to say. I would probably focus around that. You know, don't say, oh yeah, don't you remember that? Or, you know, you don't look like you have dementia. You don't look like Alzheimer's. You know, or say, you know, like I said, you know, the biggest thing is just to roll with it. And because it's different from day to day. I mean, the way this disease runs, you know, they treat me like the same person I was before, and give me opportunities to continue to try to do things without interceding. I'm going to make mistakes, you know, and Cheryl and I came up with a thing where, as long as I'm not doing anything that's going to hurt myself or hurt anyone else, and when I say hurt, I also mean verbally, you know, as well. We're going to, you know, continue to let me try to do things. I mean, I've learned new things I've never done before my diagnosis. So you can still learn with dementia, surprise, but yeah, there's still so much more you can do. So I would say just, you know, really, and get educated about dementia itself, and talk to people who really know about it.
I find, Jackie, that you really have to, you want it to be inclusive in your family, like Mike said. That's imperative. Now I have a problem where they've just totally ignored the fact that I have dementia. So, and I get always, if I get one more time, don't you remember it, to the point. Now I don't have a tremendous effect on my memory, but I do have some, and I just want to slap them every time they say it, but I'm not so compulsive yet, so I don't. But yeah, I had to have hand surgery, and I had the hand surgeon tell me, oh, you don't have dementia. And I said to him, I said, what did you between the last visit and this visit, did you go become a neurologist? I said, stick to the hand, don't bother with my brain. You know, so it's a point of just almost saying, you know, maintaining your role in the family, you know, you know, not having to make excuses for the oops and the uh-ohs that happen along the path, you know, and you know, you're right, they know the role, you know, unless it's something you're saying that's either so awful, offensive, or stupid, you know, just let it go, you know. And I think that's you know, that's important. It's really important to maintain your interaction with your family, because that stimulates your brain, that gives you more of a purpose. You know, there's comfort in doing the normal family things without having to, you know, oh, I have this dementia, I have this problem, I can't do it. Well, you know what? I've never said I can't do it. I may do it and screw it up. I taught myself how to play chess very badly. I've always wanted to play, so I decided, you know, you had to do something besides eating during the lockdown. So I taught myself how to play chess. Now the problem is when you play with yourself, you always lose. so I'm waiting to get a partner so I can actually see how really badly I play. But you're right, go out and try it, Worst case, you don't try something, you never, sometimes you try something and it's a good thing. Sometimes you try it and it's not a bad thing, but you know what? If you don't do anything, nothing happens.
Right, right.
And I'm not sitting around waiting for the archangels to come. I'm very Irish Catholic, so we know about the archangels. And I think we all, the three of us, will say, you plod along every day, and you just assume it's going to be a good day. And like Mike said, there are good days, and there are bad days. And you know what? When it's a bad day, you lay low, and then the next day comes, and you say, you know what? I got a new day. Let's see how it goes.
Yeah.
And that has to be the way it is.
Celia has a few questions. Pauline, you might really be interested in this. What's some advice for your loved ones, perhaps children, that are seeing you decline?
Well, I'm very fortunate because I have children that are very supportive. My daughter actually has a job taking care of someone living with dementia. So she's very in tune with everything that's going on with dementia, and she's incredibly supportive. So I don't really have any problems with the children at all. And my husband is very wonderful. He's picked up a lot of responsibilities, like things that I can no longer do, like cooking, because I would leave things on the stove and almost set the kitchen on fire a couple times. So he's picked up cooking, and he's picked up some of the things that I can no longer do. And he allows me to do all the advocacy work that I can do.
Terrific. Yeah. Can I switch the topic? Celia wanted us to mention making the world more dementia friendly. Can you give us some examples? How do we make the world more dementia friendly?
I'd love to answer that question. When I was living in Massachusetts, I was able to connect and make friends with this wonderful lady who owned a restaurant. And she lost her mom to younger onset Alzheimer's. Mm-hmm. And initially what she started doing was once a month, she would bring in about 3 families, the person with the diagnosis and their care partner, and invite them for lunch. She would sit us in a very quiet area of the restaurant. And she basically treated us to this wonderful meal. One day she had a young couple come in with a child who had autism. Mm-hmm. And she could see the challenges that the couple were going through with their child. And she had this idea. And what ended up developing was what's called Purple Tables. And it's a website called purpletables.com. So what happens is you can call her restaurant, and there's actually a number of restaurants now that you call and tell them that you want a purple table reservation. Everyone in the restaurant, number one, has been trained on specifically dementia as well as other disabilities. But what it allows you to do is you go to the restaurant. Number one, you're seated in the quietest area. You're seated in an area that has a lot of lighting, and you're also seated in an area that's, I think I already said, very quiet. So there's not a lot of stimulation, a lot of noise. The wait staff take extra time in explaining the menu and asking questions, but they don't know who's sitting at that table is the person with a disability. So it's still very anonymous, but it allows the family to get out back into the community where they belong. And it's before COVID, it was really taking off like wildfire. A lot of restaurants were starting to do it. For me, that's dementia friendly, as well as any other, it could be a person with PTSD, it could, like I said, a child with autism. Supermarkets could certainly have aisles dedicated for people with, and they do have some with disabilities, but I don't think that they're really fully trained specifically with dementia. one of the biggest challenges is being around a lot of people and a lot of noise. Well, you know, supermarket, it tops the list when it comes to that. So they could have checkout lanes that are a little bit more dementia friendly, to get us in and out of there a little quicker with a little bit more ease. Airports, I mean, the list goes on and on and on. But the restaurant thing, I think, is a very good example of how communities could help.
Paul is switching back to, have doctors said anything that glucose sugar intake has any effect, or that intermittent fasting helps?
My doctors haven't said anything along those lines.
I would leave that for Doreen, the
Yeah.
expert.
Well,
I mean,
oh, Lord. Okay. No, well, you know, it's interesting. The brain runs on glucose. That's the fuel. I used to say if you ate more chocolate, maybe nobody would get dementia, but that's not true either. But we do know that people with diabetes have much more effect on the vascular system than those who don't. It's not, you know, if your pancreas is working and you eat a lot of sugar, it gets broken down into energy, and you don't get the negative effects of it. Now, obviously, if you eat too much sugar, you gain weight, and then that indirectly affects your brain as well. You know that obesity is one of the sort of subset of things that perhaps put you at a higher risk. You know, I'm not a dietitian. I'm not a nutritionist. If you saw what I look like, you would say absolutely, and we know that for a fact. I think that you have to be careful with intermittent fasting, because you have to see how it affects your glucose levels, because you want to try to maintain a consistency throughout your brain. You know, I wouldn't like eat for 4 hours and fast for 20. You know, I would try to spread it out so that you're eating, you know, maybe 8 hours and fasting for 16, do the math, 16 hours or something like that. But you know, I think if you have any concern, the most important thing is to go to a registered dietitian or nutritionist. That's the person who's going to give you, because I went to one. Now, again, I'm a nurse. I'm supposed to know this stuff, but you know what? You never know enough of what you need to know. And so she was the one who really helped me with make food choices that were, you know, tolerable to me. If I can never have a can of Coca-Cola, I'm going to die right now. But I found out that, you know, I can have one and not have 20 of them, you know. So again, you know, if 90% of your diet is healthy, that gives you the 10% to enjoy your ice cream or your bourbon or your Coca-Cola or whatever else you want to do. So it's really a healthy lifestyle, not so much a particular program to join. It's making I guess you decide on the program based on what dietary needs you need.
Melissa asked, did your doctor prescribe any medications for the dementia?
Yes, I think the common ones are Aricept and Namenda that are commonly prescribed, and I still take those today.
After I got the phone call, and I had to go to the office, that was when I got the prescription for Aricept, which I think you get the diagnosis that comes along with the package of the diagnosis. And you're right, like Paul said, we're just on it. I don't, you know, there's no there's evidence that it slows somewhat the decline, but there's no phenomenal evidence that says, okay, it's really going to put the brakes on it. You know, so, you know, I take it because it doesn't bother me. If you ask me if it works, I don't know. You know, I don't want to come off of it to find out. And because if it's working, then good, you know, but you know, then you get every time I go to the neurologist, she said, well, I'm not ready to give you the Namenda yet. I said, okay, well, I guess that's going to be a hallmark or some sort when I get the prescription for the Namenda. But I was lucky I have a vascular neurologist now, so that works out better.
For me, I was given the same 2 medications that I was on from well, the first one, because they slowly work you in So I think I was on Aricept for 6
Right.
months, and then they put me on Namenda after that. Unfortunately, when we moved to Rhode Island, we had to change my insurance, my Medicare Advantage. And we didn't find out till after the fact that the insurance company now will not cover Namenda. So I haven't been on it for over a month now. It's $500. It would cost me $500 a month for that one medication.
Wow.
So unfortunately, insurance companies are getting tougher and tougher on certain, on prescriptions specifically. So I've been off of that, like I said, for a little over a month now. And has it made a difference? It's hard to tell. I feel like I wasn't even aware that I was off of it. Although when I heard Charles say it, I says, when did that happen? And she said, we talked about it, and she did mention it to me, and of course I had forgotten about it. But before we haven't even had that conversation, I feel like I've been having a harder time finding words. My short-term memory's gotten a little bit worse. I don't know if that's just coincidence, but time will tell.
Yeah.
Did
Margaret is asking about her mother-in-law. She has vascular dementia. Apparently she had at least one silent stroke and has scar tissue, which prevents processing well. She means the family. We initiated taking her to a neurologist who did the CAT scan and MRI and then the diagnosis. She is very angry with all of us, especially since we hired a lovely person through a home care agency to come be with her 3 days a week for 4 hours each. She is in constant denial of her memory loss and claims she is just fine. There are 4 kids and spouses, plus many grandchildren. We have asked her to only drive into her hometown, which she is also unhappy with us. How do we help her with understanding that she needs support? Thanks.
That's a tough one. That's a really tough one.
Yeah.
There is, but it's not that.
but it's very common. It's very
Yeah.
common. And I think I wonder if if she could get into some kind of a support group, because the people in the group are going to mirror you, and you see it in other people. It might make it easier for her to accept it in herself. I can't imagine she's going to accept somebody outside in her family telling her something's wrong. She clearly is blocking it. But I wonder if she got into a support group of some sort where she could, again, be with other people in similar situations, and perhaps they will be have a purposeful way to work her through her anger, so she can get to the other side. Because the anger, to be angry for years and years is heartbreaking, obviously for the family, but nobody wants to be angry for the rest of their lives. And again, if she can get some, I would think maybe that would be helpful, some kind of support group.
Paul asked, what is DAA? Pauline?
Dementia Action Alliance is a wonderful organization that provides education as well as opportunities for people to use the strengths they still have, and to help educate others about the disease.
Suzanne, what do you recommend caregivers do to assist the loved one who has not accepted the diagnosis?
That's a hard one. And as we said before, I don't know, to be supportive, and give them time. It's not an easy thing to accept. And again, like Mike said so eloquently before, the picture of everyone in their head when you say the word Alzheimer's disease is that person in the wheelchair who has no idea what's going on. And they, maybe if we, and again, like an organization such as DAA, which does such a marvelous job of saying there's a different picture, you know, and maybe her working, having her interact with, because the DA has so many different facets to it, you know, so working through something like that. But again, I think sometimes you just need to give them a little time, and the more you push it, the harder it is to accept. You know, there's no easy answer to that question, you know, because everybody's an individual. And again, maybe interacting more with other people, like through DAA and other organizations, where they can get more comfortable with the acceptance of the disease. That's the hard, you know, once you got to accept it and then forget it. You know, that's how I felt. Like, okay, like, you know, I had it, I got it. I'm okay. Well, I'm not happy, but I have it. And now what do I do? And that, but you can't get to that point until in your heart you can understand that you truly do have the disorder, the disease. You know, so that's the hard part.
I think part of it too, I'm mentoring a woman currently that is in that situation where she's very much in denial. And I think the thing about it is that you have to work with them and make them realize that it's not end stage. You don't just wake up with end stage dementia. You know, it's a very slow, gradual process, and you can live pretty well for a long time, depending on what kind of support you're getting.
Mhm. Yep. Lori is asking, how long after diagnosis did you move to assisted living? Pauline is still living at home. Mike is still living at home. Doreen is living in an apartment. But
Right.
so I can't say how long before they move into assisted living. I'm sure it's very, you know, dependent upon the individual family.
Yeah.
Correct.
Do your family members who assist with your care and support have any support systems that they themselves can reach out to support them in their process of supporting you?
I'll answer that from my point of view. Was
Mhm.
one thing I realized early on myself was that Cheryl needs her respite. She needs to get away. Fortunately, she's has a girlfriend that lives up in Maine, and they try to get together at least, you know, 3 or 4 times a year for a weekend where the two of them just go away for 2 or 3 days just to, you know, and she always comes back rejuvenated, and, you know, hopefully it'll last another 2 or 3 months before she has to go away again. But yeah, I mean, you know, at this point in the progression, you know, I think all of us realize that our loved ones, you know, need that. They need the same support, if not, you know, more so than we do, because it's definitely not easy being on the receiving end or watching us go through these challenges that we're going through, and knowing when to intercede and when not to intercede, and, you know, and how to do it. I mean, there's tons of books on dementia. I mean, there's movies and all this types of stuff, but it's so individualized from person to person. You know, the old saying, if you've met one person with dementia, you've met one person with dementia, because it's so different from person to person. So, you know, it's a challenge for them knowing how to react, what to say, when to say it, how to say it, you know, walking on eggshells at times, you know, everything else. I mean, I joke, you know, but one time Cheryl came through the door because she still works full time. And, you know, she told me, you know, I never know what to expect when I open the door, you know, because of what type of mood I'm going to be in or this or that. And I finally realized that, you know, I told her, I said, you know what, I feel like I'm all the characters of Winnie the Pooh. And because sometimes they're going to open the door and I'm going to be Piglet and I'm just, you know, or I'm Tigger and I'm ready to pounce, or I'm Eeyore where I'm really, oh, bother. And how hard it is for her to realize, you know, to shift gears and know how to react to that. So it's definitely difficult and challenging. And, you know, like I said, at this stage, we realize that how important it is for them to have a support system and to get their own respite and to get the breaks that they need.
Deborah is asking a difficult question. My elderly parents are living alone with assistance from my sister and me. Mom has Alzheimer's and dad has Parkinson's. What's your opinion of in-home care or going to a graduated retirement facility?
I would say that in-home care is an option, for a while, and it's a good option. It's a much better option to keep someone in the home if they're able to stay in the home medically. So that would be the preferred thing, I believe. Now, at some point, my dad had Alzheimer's and he did have to go to a facility because he couldn't manage, he couldn't manage anything. And, he needed to be in a facility.
I think that there's pros and cons, and you're right. You're staying at home is good because there's less stress of going. You don't have the stress of going to a strange environment. The only good thing about going into a graduated retirement facility is the socialization. So the home care is good as long as there's enough input from other people, that people are visiting, that they're going out into, even if it goes for a little shopping session, if they're able to, or going to the park. But once they get isolated in the house, that makes things worse. So I think at the point where the person is isolated, even though they're getting great home care, that may be the point where you say, okay, you know what, in order for them to thrive, they need more stimulation. And I think Mike said it, the more you stimulate your brain, the better it works. And, I think so. You might see that a better outcome if they're, again, depending upon how they personally do at home. But the socialization is very key, because you get isolated, you get caught up in yourself.
Paul is asking, I believe this may be the last question. Are there any activities, exercise, games, word games, puzzles, etc., that doctors suggest to help?
I don't know that doctors have suggested any of that, but I think it's a wonderful idea. We play a lot of games, and I do think it's mentally challenging and stimulating.
Yeah.
I have a lot of games on my phone, and I play every day. And sometimes it's like, oh my God, what am I can't even get through the game, but you keep going at it because that's important. But no doctor has ever suggested actually anything except take the pill. That's the beginning and the end of their input. And like Mike said, and I'll see you in 6 months. I'll see you in 6 months is about all you get. And then you go in, but so you're not getting anything from the doctors. But yeah, I've worked actually with a cognitive therapist. Speech language pathologists are also do cognitive work. So I work with one of them once a month, and that's the person who really showed me, try this game, try that game. So every morning, I get up bright and early because I'm old and you don't sleep late. I play the games and I play them that's how I started learning chess online with Dr. Wolf. And he teaches you how to play chess, and and you get stimulated by playing the games, and they're fun. You look forward to them.
Mm-hmm.
Thank God for, I always said between the iPhone or smartphones and Google and GPS are the salvations of people with dementia. Because you don't remember something, you look it up. If if you can't figure out where you're going, you use your GPS, and if you're not sure of something, you go to your phone. So if I lose my phone, I don't know where I'm going. So I use the GPS for places I even know where I'm going, because I find that it lessens the stress of actually driving.
Well, Stacy added, I play Scrabble with my mom who has dementia, and she says it helps her brain.
Yeah.
No doubt that that's the case, absolutely. So I really appreciate all of the questions, Melissa. It was so interesting to be able to get, questions from other people. And one of the things I would just like to recommend is that some of your viewers go on to daanow.org. There's an entire resource center. There are virtual engagement programs if they wanted to sign up. But I'm going to turn it over to you, Melissa.
I have one final question that I would like to ask the panel. And it came out in the news recently. You might have heard this, maybe not, but that there is a new drug for Alzheimer's for the first time in 20 years. I know that it will be a part of a trial first. Mike, I know you mentioned trials as something that sort of helps with costs, but this may be something that people wanted to jump on the bandwagon for and just see how it works. I would like to hear from each of you your thoughts on this new medication, and are we a little too slow in getting new medications for dementia and Alzheimer's?
If I may speak, we're beyond slow. It's atrocious that it took 20 years to and actually come up with something that actually shows improvement in some individuals. Now, this is a drug that's not appropriate for everyone who has dementia or Alzheimer's disease, but for the group that it is appropriate for, it's hopeful. But within the last 20 years, we've cured cancers, we've cured coronary disease, we take leaps and bounds and managing a lot of other diseases, diabetes and MS, and so much had happened because I personally think because it was so overwhelming, they stuck this disease in the corner and everybody along with it. And finally, now people are pushing forward and saying, you got to get off the bandwagon. You've got to do the research. It's okay to do the research and fail, but if you don't try things, and I find this personally uplifting, not because it's going to cure everything and make everybody happy, but because it's showing that finally the science is giving the due respect to the disease.
Mike, your thoughts?
I couldn't agree with Doreen more. I mean, when I was first diagnosed, I was connected with my local Alzheimer's Association, and that's where I started doing my advocacy work at the local level as well as federally. Going to Washington every year, they have what's called the Dementia Alzheimer's Advocacy Forum, and you actually get to go talk with your senators and congressmen and talk to them and tell them why we needed increased funding for research. That was in 2014. At that time, there was only $500 million a year that was going towards NIH funding for dementia, specifically Alzheimer's. And if you look at the death rates, dementia, people die of dementia more than breast cancer and heart disease combined. And not that we're saying we don't want those areas to get research, but at the time, breast cancer alone, I think, was getting $6 billion a year in funding for NIH. Fortunately, the tide slowly turned, and in a matter of 4 or 5 years, because of some very brave congressmen and senators, that funding now is up to over close to $3 billion a year. But if you talk to the researchers, that's still not enough. What they want is $20 billion a year for research. That's what's really going to be needed. But to answer your question about the drug, it is very exciting. It won't help me because I don't have Alzheimer's, but I have plenty of friends who do, and I'm excited like crazy. I have a number of them who are in the initial drug trials. My biggest fear is that when it finally, if it does finally prove effective, is the cost. And sadly, right now, the rumors that are going around is that it could potentially cost anywhere between, on the low side, $30,000 a year, on the high side, $70,000 a year to get the drug. So our insurance company is going to cover that? unless there's definitive proof that it can help, I don't see it happening. So that's the biggest fear in the dementia community, is that something's going to, they're going to develop something, but who's going to be able to afford it?
Pauline, your final thoughts on this as well.
Well, I agree with much of what has been said. I think that one of the things is it works with early in the early stages of the disease. So it doesn't help, quite a large majority of people that have Alzheimer's. And it doesn't help with other forms of dementia either. And I think that there are some things you have to be cautious of. They've talked about some bleeding of the brain as a possible effect too. So I'm cautiously optimistic about it.
Jackie, you have been a fantastic hostess. Paul, Doreen, Pauline, your experiences that you shared with all of us today, extremely eye-opening for all of us. We all appreciate the humor and the candor, and we thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you for the
Thank
opportunity.
you
you
so
for having
much.
It was it's a great experience. I'm so glad was a part of it. And I love chatting with my fellow members of the select group of the dementia people. So that was fun.
Thank you so much, everybody. We just want everybody to know that this webinar, we know it will be well shared, it will be widely watched, and it will be available starting tomorrow afternoon at www.seniorlivinglive.com. I also want to let you know that for everybody who has joined us here today, you will receive an email with a direct link to this webinar. Please share with your friends and family as much as you want. It is going to be available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We are all so glad that you could take the time out of your day to be a part of our conversation. Thank you so much for watching Senior Living Live. Have a great day, everybody.